This is the food pyramid, and it used to represent the ideal diet that every person had to follow. The food pyramid is actually a huge lie, and today you're gonna to see a lot of evidence that this lie was intentional. The food pyramid that we all know and studied was and continues to be a reason for the spread of extreme opposites, diabetes, heart disease around the world. There are people and companies that influence it for their own benefits. Research papers had a huge amounts of money paid for them to change people's diets for a very long time into the future. So what happened here? How did this mistake make it to our school books? I'll tell you now.
Hello guys, how are you? What's up? Sorry that I'm gonna to be the reason you get the course of awareness. But this topic is really interesting and I wanted to start with a story to show you where the mistake started. So let's go a little bit back in history because this food pyramid was from back then, but its influence continues until today. Honestly, this pyramid lives somewhere in my subconscious mind behind. The food pyramid, that's it. It's still present on the food boxes we buy normally until now. Now, before I show you the many wrong things in the pyramid, because the minute you see it, you will get lost in it like, this is the thing I studied in school. Impossible we believe in this. But I wanted to tell you a story that will show you everything that went wrong. Let's go back to the 17th. The US Department of Agriculture, which was responsible for issuing dietary guidelines, was working on something called the basic food groups. So the Department of Agriculture decided to consult many nutrition experts and scientists to help them come up with new dietary guidelines, an ideal diet for the American people. So they contacted a nutritionist who was teaching at NYU, New York University, named Louise Light. She was a good person. That's why I consider her. That's why I imagine they gave her the task to suggest new dietary guidelines. So she and her team worked diligently to come up with nutrition guidelines that would be used by an entire population. The food provided in schools for students would be based on these guidelines. The food for the elderly, the food in prisons. People's eating habits would be affected by these things. These are government guidelines, and her guidelines were good. The diet she proposed was based on vegetables and fruit. That most of your calories should come from vegetables and fruits. Then protein from its natural source like meat, fish, and eggs, which also contains something natural fats. Then comes wheat and grain. At the top of the pyramid, she emphasized that they should be whole grains. She urged people not to eat refined bread or processed food, to eat wheat and grains, but to eat them correctly. Then comes calcium-rich foods, which include dairy products. Then fats, and it was also essential that there be a source of fat and water. Now, these are the dietary guidelines she proposed to the department, and the department in the end published this food pyramid. The US Department of Agriculture decided to completely ignore the nutritionist Louise Light and made this pyramid. At the piece, the most important thing in your ideal diet is wheat and grain, and in this section, they put crackers, cornflakes, pasta, refined white bread. These are the foundation of the ideal diet, and you must eat from 6 to 11 servings of this per day. We haven't even gone up the pyramid yet. 6 to 11 servings of cornflakes every day, or 6 to 11 slices of bread. I think now you're starting to realize where the mistake happened, right? We have vegetables and fruits, a good decision. Meat, fish, plant-based protein sources, even eggs and nuts, which are a source of natural fats and protein, are at the top of the pyramid, next to the dairy product section. These are not as important as eating 6 to 11 servings of wheat and grains, because you are a sheep and you have to be fed wheat in this quantity. Then at the very top of the pyramid, it's marked use sparingly, meaning don't consume much fat. Between parentheses natural, occurring and added, and sugars, you should reduce this, the things at the top of the pyramid. Now, if you go look
at the losses pyramid and ask any nutritionist today in our current time, they will tell you that this is not bad. Even with all the scientific advancements and researchers we've reached today. Actually good that your diet is centered around protein and natural fat. This is what we've reached now. She proposed it in the 18th. They ignored her. And in 1919, this pyramid was finally released. And yes, it made it into our box. And we all studied it. By the way, before you continue, subscribe. Subscription rates are low these days. Even thought we're putting effort into the content. So subscribe.
In their dietary guidelines, they told us to stay far away from saturated fats. The fats found in meat and animal organs like liver, for example, and eggs. Stay away from saturated fats. Even thought humans have been hunting this stuff and eating it whole for thousands of years, and we're fine. Humans lived thousands of years. But no, stay away from these things that got created because they contain cholesterol. Cholesterol will cause you heart problems. Remember, I'm telling you stuff from back in the day. Okay, now things are different. Our science is different now. There is healthy cholesterol and unhealthy cholesterol. Now, those things are actually good for you now. Okay, but wait. Stay away from those things and eat the things that don't contain cholesterol, like polysaturated fats, meaning use seed oils like sunflower oil and corn oil. But don't use butter because it's an animal product. Polysaturated, yes, that's correct. And this was a huge mistake. And now I'll show you proof that they had evidence that these things actually kill you. This increased death rates, and those don't increase death rates. From a study they did over 5 years. But still, this research paper where they did this experiment disappeared. And they didn't announce its findings until 2016. Even that happened in 1986. This study I'm telling you about. How did this happen to us? Lewis' Life finally came out in 2005 and spoke and revealed what happened with her. That she came out with a dietary plan 1, 2, 3. And they decided to do what they had in their heads. Her comments were the following. The first thing she noticed was that there was a change in the words she used to push people to eat more processed food instead of whole foods. The food we should actually be eating has shifted phrases like eat less to avoid too much. Meaning instead of saying eat less, they say be careful not to eat too much. Do you understand what happens when you say it like that? She expressed her opinion that encouraged people to eat so many refined and processed grains, which our bodies treat as a sugar, is a very scary thing. The base of the food pyramid is things that our bodies process as a sugar. It turns them into glucose. They also suggested that half of the grains you eat should be whole grains. So, by that logic, they're suggesting that the other half can be refined and processed, like cornflakes. The cornflakes you're eating have gone through 60 types of processing and are basically just a block of sugar. She said the food pyramid was sold to the highest bidder. It was sold to whoever afforded the most money. And in this way, she showed that it was sold to companies related to grains and wheat. But what really happened behind the scenes? What led to our food pyramid begin with is, how could something mislead us for over 20 years? Let's break this pyramid down into sections and go through it one by one. Greens. Why did greens become the base? And why did we make meat the villain? We pushed it far away from us. Let's start with the meat section. Okay? Because meat is very interesting. Our story starts with the US President Dwight Eisenhower, the 34th president, who had a heart attack in 1955. He had the heart attack during a time when there was a lot of talk about heart disease, not just in America, but all around the world. Heart disease was the leading cause of death. People were generally very afraid of heart disease. It hit a US president who played golf. He had a heart attack, and they actually died
thought it was just a gas. Yes, medicine wasn't advanced back then, but even now in 2025, people still fear meat, thinking it causes a heart disease. Yet they don't fear sunflower oil, which comes from seeds. Anyway, my friend, the heart attack triggered a China of research. In the same year, 1955, there was an American doctor named Ansel Keys who was sitting with the World Health Organization in Geneva, and he proposed a theory, not yet proven at the time. He claimed that saturated fats were the primary cause of heart disease. He presented a graph to prove his theory. The graph used data for 6 countries, showing the number of calories coming from saturated fats compared to the number of heart disease cases. Okay, when you look at the graph, it shows a 100% correlation. The more saturated fat people eat, the more heart disease. Saturated fat become the enemy. But his theory was highly criticized because he had a data for 22 countries at the time, but only used 6 for his graph. If he used all 22 countries, the graph would have been totally random, showing no correlation at all. This was a very strong criticism against him. He cherry-picked countries to make his theory work. This is also a well-known issue among researchers. Even Thomas Epperson was criticized for this same thing, saying that real 100% per science may never reach us, because researchers always tend to have a bias towards proving their own ideas right. There is a bias to make my own idea correct. Of course, this doesn't apply to all research, but I found it to be an interesting piece of information to tell you that. Anyway, the following year, he conducted his 7-country study, a paper studying the relation between diet, lifestyle, and heart disease to find out the major cause of heart disease. Back to President Eisenhower, the American people were very tired of heart disease at the time. Okay, by the way, the man used to smoke 4 packs of cigarettes a day. Anyone who smokes understands what 4 packs a day means. The chance of not having a heart attack while smoking 4 packs a day are probably very low. But that's not the point. Okay, here's a small but important fact. The American Heart Association used to be a very small organization until it got sponsored by a company called P&G, Procter & Gamble. In the 1948, they donated $1.7 million, which is equivalent to $22 million today. After adjusting for inflation, that donation helped the American Heart Association grow and become nationally recognized in the US. P&G, the sponsor who made that donation, produces a product called Crisco. Crisco is a mix of soybean oil granules, hydrogenated palm oil, and regular palm oil. It's mainly polysaturated and monosaturated fats per serving, so they donated $22 million to the Heart Association. The association grew and funded research, which concluded that saturated fat is the enemy and that fats without cholesterol are better. Ansel Keys, the man behind the 7 countries study, which was already criticized for cherry-picking data, to publish another people attacking saturated fats and admit again, there was a fundamental problem in data research. They had to rely on people self-reporting what they ate, so it depended on what people said about themselves, which made it risky. But in 1968, they conducted a proper, reliable study. They gathered data from nursing homes, where they had precise records of what the residents were eating. The study lasted 5 years, from 1968 to 1973, aiming to definitively determine whether saturated fats truly cause heart disease and whether unsaturated fats are truly better. One of the lead investigators in the study was Ansel Keys himself. This study results were never released until 1989. The experiment ended in 1973. The results should have come out then, but they weren't published until 1989. 60 years later, imagine that during all these years, people were believing that they had to avoid these products, meat and eggs. When they finally published the paper in 1989, it turned out that replacing saturated fats with unsaturated fats made no difference in heart disease rates. Both were the same. So the saturated fats they told us were evil and needed to be replaced with unsaturated fats. They're actually the same. It also turned out that the paper they published wasn't even complete. It didn't include all the data they had collected. But in 2016, a doctor contacted the son of one of the research involved in the study and asked him to look through his father's old files to see if anything was left. The son found research papers hidden in their basement. He found that there were 60,000 data symbols proving that replacing saturated fats with vegetable oils didn't make any difference. It lowers cholesterol but increased heart disease and death rates. The study had actually included that these vegetable oils increase heart disease and death compared to natural meats, but they decided not to release this information to the public. It was discovered by chance in 2016 when the researcher's son found the papers. This information was deliberately hidden. It's very clear that this was intentional, not only because they delayed publishing the paper for 60 years, but also because the paper was incomplete. It's obvious there was a base to steer people away from meat. But why? What could be the reason? Apart from some researchers' basis and their reluctance to admit they were wrong. When the paper was finally published, Ansel Keane's name wasn't even on it. He even thought he was one of the participants. His name wasn't included because the results went against what he had spent his life believing. His base was so strong that he didn't want the information proving him wrong to smear. He deprived the whole world of the information that these oils are harmful, that they are literally killing people. Cholesterol wasn't increasing, but people were dying. He published people away from what humans have been eating for millions of years for his own interest. So after terrifying people about saturated fats, how do you make them more wheat? How do you make them eat more cornflakes? How do you make them eat more rice? How do you make them eat more pasta? How do you make them eat more oats? What you do? There is also another interesting story about wheat, but it's much shorter. How did wheat and grains become the foundation of human diet? There are some logic reasons and some illogical ones. Let me tell you a quick story from the 1970s. There was a global wheat shortage. Africa, Asia, their weather conditions were tribal, with lots of monsoons and such.
Supply was whipped out. America also had issues. Since wheat was scarce, its price was high. Eventually, the Soviet Union had to turn to the US to buy wheat to avoid starvation. They came with an open wallet. They desperately needed wheat. America, of course, didn't miss this chance and closed one of the biggest wheat deals in history. The deal was worth $750 million. At the same time, the US Secretary of Agriculture, Errol Betts, appointed by President Richard Nixon in 1971, what he did lifted many of the restrictions had been placed on farmers regarding how much they could plant. There had been limits to protect farmers so the harvest wouldn't become too cheap due to competition. He removed these limits under the slogan, "Get back or get out." This massively boosted wheat production. But the wheat shortage was gonna to be solved sooner or later. And it was. Russia no longer needed to buy as much wheat from the US. Now they had excess wheat. What to do with it? As Secretary of Agriculture, he had influence over the dietary guidelines. Do you think there may be a connection between these policies and the fact that wheat became the foundation of the health diet? We can't say no. Here's the key point. The US Department of Agriculture, whose job is to promote agriculture, is also the same body that tells us what to eat and sets the dietary guidelines. They pushed farmers to grow wheat, so they ended up with a massive wheat surplus. Is there a bias here,
or not? I think there is, especially considering the links I mentioned with the food sector, Kellogg's and General Mills. It makes sense. Now, let me ask you this. Why is there a dairy section in the food pyramid? When you look through history and different culture, there are civilizations that lived for thousands of years without consuming any dairy products from mammals, meaning from us mammals. After the nursing period, there is no scientific proof saying we must consume dairy products. Yes, we need calcium, but calcium is available from other sources. Actually, the first food pyramid created in Sweden in the 1917s didn't even have a dairy category. So why did it appear later? There are many stories around this, but I couldn't find any concrete proof. There are rumors of pressure from Asian processed cheese companies like Kraft, but again, nothing confirmed. So let's leave this aside. All of this lead the food pyramid that was resolved in 1992, which changed how people around the world thought about food. How did it spread so widely? The World Health Organization heavily promoted it. The US promoted it massively in the media and schools. Textbooks. Textbooks worldwide often cite American publication. For example, when I was in school, following a British curriculum, our books were published by Pearson, an American publisher. So this pyramid reached all the way there, and to me and to the official textbooks we all study. It became the global standard. But I also told you there may be another logical reason, and I must mention it to stay invested. Where is the idea? At the same pyramid was released, used from 1992 to 2011, but is still popular today. There was widespread malnutrition and food scarcity in some parts of the world. Some researchers and doctors, like the author of the book on the American diet, said it was crucial. It was crucial to find cheap, calorie-dense foods that wouldn't spoil quickly and could be easily stored and transported to feed us as many people as possible. So maybe the Secretary of Agriculture's push for wheat production was actually the perfect solution at the time, a solution that was so effective it had long-lasting impacts. In the end, if you want to easily feed the masses at a reasonable cost, you have to rely on green products. Meat is much harder to produce, preserve, and transport. It spoils quickly. Wheat is much easier. Ultimately, the result was clear. When these dietary guidelines were introduced, opposite rose. Ultimately, the result was clear. When these dietary guidelines were introduced, opposite rates rose dramatically, even among children. Naturally, with more opposite come more chronic diseases. So, what's the solution? What should you eat? I'm not a nutritionist or an expert, but my simple rule is choose what God created, not something that has gone through 50 stages of processing. Always ask a nutrition experts. Watch nutrition videos. Keep educating yourself. At the end of the day, you are what you eat. If you want to eat a whole factory, that's your choice. Ultimately, the decision is yours. So tell me, do you think what happened here was really that wrong? Love you guys. Bye.